Amira had grown up in a grey apartment block where cracked walls whispered of lives stuck in place. She spent her days translating documents for a small firm, staring at words that promised worlds she would never see. At 25, her life felt suspended, waiting, longing for something extraordinary. When she received the invitation to an international cultural gala in Vienna, she convinced herself it was fate answering her hunger. That evening shimmered with chandeliers and velvet gowns. Amira stood awkwardly among politicians, artists, and magnates, her simple dress setting her apart. Then her eyes met his. Sheikh Khalid Al-Rashid, tall and immaculately dressed, carried himself with the quiet assurance of a man used to reverence. He asked for her name, and in that instant the crowded hall dissolved into silence around them. His conversation flowed like silk. He praised her knowledge of languages, admired her strength to leave her modest roots, and spoke of a future where she would not have to fight for scraps of recognition. For the first time, someone of power seemed to see her, not as a servant of words, but as a woman worthy of admiration. After the gala, she found herself waiting for his calls, her heart rising at the sound of his deep voice. Weeks passed, and Khalid's gestures grew lavish. Flights, gifts, promises whispered across oceans, each word wrapped around her like gold chains, light enough to feel like jewelry, heavy enough to hold her captive. When he invited her to Dubai, calling her his special guest, her mother's face tightened with unease. "Amira, men like this, they own everything. Be careful." Amira forced a smile. "Mama, it's different. He respects me. He says I'm free with him." Her mother shook her head, but Amira pressed her hand. "I need to take this chance." The farewell at the airport was heavy with silence. Her father looked away, unwilling to voice his doubts. Her mother hugged her too tightly, as if trying to anchor her to the life she was leaving behind. Amira boarded the plane with trembling hands, convincing herself that fear was only the shadow of change. Through the airplane window, the desert city rose from the horizon like a mirage of light and glass. Dubai's towers pierced the sky, glowing under the sun's fire. Limousines and flashing cameras greeted her at the airport, but her eyes searched only for him. Khalid waited, smiling with practiced warmth, his presence commanding even in silence. That night, as the gates of his palace opened, Amira felt her chest swell with wonder. Golden arches stretched high above her, marble fountains sang with flowing water, and manicured gardens glowed under lantern light. Her footsteps echoed on polished stone as servants bowed their heads. She whispered to herself, "This is paradise." But the gates closed behind her, with a sound heavier than she expected, sealing her inside the palace that would soon reveal more than dreams. The first days in the palace unfolded like a living dream. Amira wandered through halls of white marble veined with gold, ceilings painted with constellations, and chandeliers that scattered 1,000 shards of light. Every corner promised luxury: silk sheets, carved wooden screens, perfumes heavy as honey. Servants appeared at the softest whisper, their movements precise, their eyes lowered. Khalid seemed endlessly attentive. He escorted her to grand dinners, where dishes of saffron, lamb, and rosewater sweets appeared in endless sequence. He guided her through gardens of jasmine and fountains, his voice low and magnetic as he told her stories of power and lineage. Amira found herself basking in his approval, intoxicated by the attention of a man worshipped by so many. Yet, beneath the glitter, small shadows stirred. Guards patrolled the grounds day and night, their rifles glinting beneath the lanterns. Cameras followed her steps down every corridor. Whenever she lingered too long at a window, a servant would appear, reminding her of a scheduled activity. The freedom she thought she had gained began to feel curated, scripted, an illusion designed to keep her dazzled. One evening, Amira asked about visiting the city. Khalid's smile froze. "The world outside is dangerous, Habibti. You are safe here. Why would you wish to leave paradise?" "I only want to see more of your country," she replied carefully. He reached for her hand, his grip tightening. "Everything you need is within these walls. Trust me." The firmness in his tone silenced her. She nodded, though unease pressed like a weight on her chest. Her days soon fell into patterns. Breakfast in the glass atrium, walks through manicured gardens under the watch of guards. Evenings beside Khalid as he entertained guests with laughter that never quite reached his eyes. She became fluent in the rhythms of his moods. The sudden silences, the unblinking stares when she spoke too boldly, the possessive way he rested his hand on her shoulder in front of others. One afternoon, while wandering alone, Amira found herself in a long corridor where portraits of veiled women lined the walls. Their painted eyes followed her, expressions frozen in half-smiles. She lingered, studying the plaque beneath one portrait. Layla bint Samira, another, Miriam Al-Faruqi 2010. All dates ended abruptly, with no further detail. A soft voice startled her. "They are from before." A maid stood nearby, clutching a tray to her chest. "Before what?" Amira asked. The maid lowered her gaze, lips trembling as if words had risen but could not escape. She bowed quickly and hurried away, leaving Amira alone with the silent women on the walls. That night she dreamed of them, faces pressed behind glass, whispering warnings she could not understand. She woke with her throat tight, the echo of Khalid's words circling her mind. Why would you wish to leave paradise? Still, every morning she dressed in gowns he provided, smiled when he entered, and convinced herself she was safe. But deep inside, the palace had shifted. Its beauty no longer shone as freedom, but glared like sunlight through bars. And in the silence of the corridors, Amira began to wonder what had happened to the women before her. The palace grew quieter for Amira as weeks passed. Laughter from dinners with visiting dignitaries no longer impressed her. The shimmering dresses felt like costumes stitched to disguise unease. Her reflection in polished mirrors showed a woman living a dream that was beginning to fracture. It was in the servants' quarters, far from the golden halls, that she first met Layla. The young maid moved with nervous precision, her eyes always lowered, until Amira whispered a simple thank you. The words seemed to startle her. Slowly, over hidden exchanges, Layla's silence broke into fragments of trust. One evening, while Amira lingered by the fountains, Layla whispered, "Be careful here. The walls listen." Amira frowned. "What do you mean?" Layla's gaze darted to the guards. "Others came before you. They thought they were chosen. They vanished. No one speaks of them." The words chilled her more than the desert night air. Amira began to notice details she had once ignored. Doors locked without reason, whispers cut short when she entered a room, servants who avoided her eyes as if afraid her fate might cling to them. Khalid's charm in public never faltered, but in private his questions grew sharper. "Who were you speaking to in the garden?" he asked one night, his tone laced with suspicion. "A maid. She brought me tea." He leaned close, his smile tight. "You don't need servants for companionship. You have me." The intensity in his gaze left her breathless, not with love, but with fear. Arguments began to flicker between them, like sparks on dry ground. Amira wanted to explore, to meet people outside the palace. Khalid dismissed her requests with the same rehearsed phrases: safety, protection, devotion. But each refusal deepened the cage around her. Late at night she found herself walking alone through endless marble corridors, her footsteps echoing against silence. The portraits of women she had once studied now haunted her, their painted smiles sharper in the dim light. She imagined their whispers filling the air, warnings she was too late to heed. Layla's quiet companionship became her only relief. They met in corners of the kitchen, behind pillars in the gardens, exchanging hurried words. Layla spoke of her family in a distant village, of debts that bound her to the palace. But when Amira asked again about the vanished women, Layla shook her head. "Do not ask. Secrets here are buried deep. To speak them is dangerous." Danger pressed closer each day. Guards seemed to linger longer near her chambers. Khalid's presence shadowed her even in absence. She felt his gaze in every camera, every watchful eye. One night, after an argument where he accused her of ingratitude, Khalid leaned close enough for his breath to brush her ear. "This palace has stood for centuries. It keeps its secrets, and so will you." The words sank into her like poison. For the first time, Amira realized paradise was not simply cracking, it was collapsing around her. Loneliness became Amira's constant companion. Even in rooms crowded with servants and guarded by men in uniforms, she felt utterly unseen. Khalid's presence suffocated her. His affection had turned into possession, and every smile now carried the sharpness of a blade. It was during one of the palace drives into the desert that she first noticed Youssef. He was young, with steady eyes that flicked toward her in the rearview mirror, never lingering too long, but enough to remind her that someone still recognized her as human. When Khalid stepped away to speak with an official, Amira whispered, "Do you ever get used to these walls?" Youssef's knuckles tightened on the wheel. "You don't, you just learn not to look at them." The brief exchange sparked something she had buried, the ache for honest words. Days later, when Khalid traveled abroad for a week, Amira found herself walking the palace gardens at dusk. Youssef appeared near the gates, adjusting the car. Their eyes met in the fading light. This time, neither looked away. They began to meet in stolen moments. A conversation in the shadow of the courtyard. A shared laugh when her scarf tangled in the breeze. Youssef's voice carried warmth she hadn't felt in months, reminding her of a world beyond marble and gold. "You don't belong here," he told her quietly one night. Her heart pounded. "Where do I belong then?" "With people who let you breathe." The words wrapped around her like a promise. Amira knew the risk. Cameras hung in corners, guards patrolled endlessly, and Khalid's reach was absolute. Yet the danger only fueled the fire between them. When Youssef brushed her hand while passing a tray, her skin burned with electricity. When they met under the carved arches of the service wing, their whispers turned to confessions, and confessions to stolen kisses. But shadows were never far. One evening, after Amira slipped back to her chambers, she noticed her door already ajar. Inside, Khalid sat waiting in silence, his gaze locked on the security monitor beside him. He smiled slowly. "The palace sees everything." Amira's throat tightened, but he said nothing more, only rose and left her trembling in the echo of his footsteps. The silence felt heavier than any shouted accusation. Still, her secret continued. She convinced herself that love, real, fragile, desperate love, was worth the peril. Youssef began to speak of escape, of plans to slip away under the cover of night. His confidence gave her strength, though fear gnawed at her every step. One night as they stood in the shadows of the garage, Youssef cupped her face in his hands. "Whatever happens, I won't let him destroy you." Tears burned her eyes. "We can't wait much longer." Their embrace was fleeting, but it carried the weight of defiance. In that moment, Amira felt alive again, not as a possession, but as a woman who still had a choice. Yet in the silent corners of the palace, unseen eyes were already watching, and Khalid's suspicion grew like a storm gathering beyond the horizon. The palace grew colder after Khalid's return. Amira felt it in the way the guards lingered at her door, in the silence of the maids who once dared to whisper. Even Layla kept her distance, her eyes wide with fear whenever they met. Something had shifted, and Amira knew the secret she had tried to guard was no longer safe. One evening, Khalid summoned her to the marble hall, where chandeliers glowed above, and the echo of their steps carried like whispers. He stood beneath a gilded arch, hands clasped behind his back, a portrait of calm. "I want to show you something," he said softly. On the polished table before him lay a small device, one of the palace's many cameras. He pressed a button, and grainy footage appeared on the screen. Amira's heart lurched as she saw herself walking through the service wing. Then Youssef entered the frame, their hands brushing, their heads bent close together. Khalid's eyes never left her face. "Tell me," he murmured, "how long have you betrayed me?" Her throat tightened, words clawed to escape, but none came. She managed only, "It isn't what it seems." His hand struck the table, the crack reverberating like thunder. "Do not insult me. I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me? Like the others?" Tears stung her eyes. "I only wanted to be free. You keep me locked inside these walls." Khalid's expression hardened. "Freedom? You confuse freedom with weakness. I offered you protection, devotion, yet you crawl to a servant." The venom in his voice made her shiver. For the first time she glimpsed the depths of his rage, no longer hidden beneath charm. "Please," she whispered, "don't hurt him." Khalid stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. You think I care for him? He is nothing. The question is, what will I do with you? She tried to hold his gaze, but the weight of it crushed her resolve. She realized that her life, her choices, even her body, now balanced in the palm of his hand. That night, Layla's bed in the servants' quarters lay empty. Whispers spread through the staff that she had been dismissed, sent back to her village. But Amira knew better. The silence surrounding Layla was too complete, too final. In her chambers, Amira wept quietly, fear seeping into her veins. She thought of Yusuf, of their whispered promises, and wondered if their plan for escape had already been shattered. When she closed her eyes, Khalid's words echoed in the darkness, like the others. The palace, once a sanctuary, had become a tomb of secrets, and Amira knew her time was running out. The plan was desperate, but desperation was all they had. Yusuf whispered it to her in the dim garage. At midnight, while the palace slept, he would drive her beyond the gates. From there they would vanish into the city, faceless among millions. Amira clung to the idea like a lifeline, though dread coiled in her chest. That night she slipped from her chambers, heart racing with every step. The corridors felt alive, eyes hidden in every corner. She pressed against the cold stone, listening for guards, her breaths shallow. At the gates, Yusuf waited, hands trembling as he motioned her forward. "We leave now," he whispered. "Don't look back." For a moment hope surged. She slid into the car, her pulse pounding like drums. But before the engine roared to life, shadows moved. Two black SUVs cut across the driveway, their headlights blinding. Guards spilled out, rifles gleaming under the moon. "Run!" Yusuf shouted, throwing open the door. Amira stumbled into the garden, branches clawing her arms as she fled among the roses and marble fountains. Behind her, shouts erupted, boots pounding against gravel. A gunshot cracked the air. She froze, turning in time to see Yusuf collapse, his body swallowed by the darkness. No. Her scream tore through the night, but hands seized her, dragging her back through the labyrinth of hedges. Her struggles were useless against their grip. The scent of jasmine mixed with the stench of fear, choking her as she was hauled toward the palace. Khalid stood waiting in the garden's center, framed by lanterns and shadows. His white robe glowed in the moonlight, his expression carved from stone. "You disappoint me, Amira," he said quietly, almost tenderly. "You could have been safe. Instead, you chose betrayal." Tears streaked her face. "Please, don't do this. I'll stay. I'll obey." His eyes narrowed. "No, you already belong to the silence." The guards forced her to her knees, before a newly placed marble statue, a veiled woman holding a torch, her face serene. Workers had erected it only days earlier, its base surrounded by freshly turned soil. Amira's screams echoed through the garden as they bound her wrists. She begged, cursed, pleaded, but Khalid only raised his hand, and the voices of the guards drowned hers. The earth swallowed her cries, layer by layer, until the garden grew still again. When the last shovel of dirt was patted flat, Khalid stepped forward. He brushed dust from the statue's base, his expression unreadable. "Paradise keeps its secrets," he murmured. The lanterns flickered in the night breeze. The garden returned to silence, its fountains singing softly, masking the horror beneath. Amira was gone, consumed by the palace she once believed was her dream. A year passed before the palace stirred with whispers again. Renovations had begun in the gardens, new statues, fresh marble, fountains rebuilt to dazzle visiting dignitaries. Workers moved through the manicured hedges, lifting stone, digging earth, reshaping paradise. It was beneath the statue of the veiled woman that the truth broke free. A shovel struck something that was not stone. The worker froze, eyes widening as pale bone pushed through the soil. Soon more hands joined, scraping away dirt until the shape of a body emerged, curled and fragile, as if still struggling for air. Word spread quickly, but within the palace walls it was swallowed by silence. The guards ordered the workers away. The body was carried off in the dark of night, wrapped in white cloth, hidden from prying eyes. Frizzing whispers leaked to the outside world. A young woman, bones fractured, traces of cloth that did not match local fabrics. Some dared to name her Amira, the foreign guest who had once arrived in silks and smiles before vanishing without a farewell. Khalid appeared before the press, grief etched on his practiced face. "A tragedy," he said smoothly. "An intruder buried in my grounds long ago. Nothing to do with us." Cameras flashed, his words recorded and repeated, but never challenged. His wealth, his power, his reach ensured that truth bent to his will. Behind closed doors, the staff said nothing. Layla's absence was never explained. Yusef's name vanished, as though he had never existed. The palace stood unshaken, its marble walls gleaming, its gardens blooming over secrets that would never find justice. Yet for those who had known her, the workers who unearthed her, the few servants who remembered her soft voice, the silence burned. They carried her ghost in their eyes, a reminder that paradise was built not on dreams, but on graves. The statue still rose in the garden, serene and unyielding, her torch lifted high. Beneath her feet lay the story the world would never hear. And in the golden palace of the Sheikh, silence triumphed once more.